common conversation starter is, what would be your superpower if you could pick anything? And people typically throw out, I want to fly, I want to be invisible, I want to read people's minds, I want to solve hunger. All of these plethora of tangible actions. I'd have to say the biggest superpower we have in this world is choice. And when that's threatened, we are compromised significantly. My name is Layla, and I'm so glad to have you on The Strong Way of Life. All right, guys. Today we are doing a book review. It is called Drinking, a Love Story by Carolyn Knapp. My soul was so filled in this message. It is a tough read because it involves topics of addiction and substance use. And it's really hard to understand those things, especially coming from an upbringing that kind of pushed that aside. It was always no. There was never really deep conversing and learning considering substances. It was just a very taboo topic. And I'm super glad to be able to make this video today, because even though I don't feel like super qualified to give you the in-depth components of addiction, I feel like starting to have more open conversations and becoming more aware of the life experiences around all of us are so unique, and we have something to gain from those who differ from us. I feel like in reality, each of us has our own vices that can go into an addiction form. Whether this is something that resonates with you because you might struggle with substance use, or it's a different vice in your life, I hope there is a message in here for you. Something I thought was cool that I didn't recognize until a few chapters out from completing the reading was that the girl in the book is the actual author. I don't know why I didn't make that connection, but when I did, my heart just kind of felt a drive to want to understand people deeper. And it really opened me up further. Like, I know people have different life experiences than me, but it helped me further clarify life is not easy. And giving people grace, but also knowing when boundaries need to be drawn and navigating that is so complex. And I think it just showed me the fragility of life as well. So many things can slide under you, leave you in such a fleeting moment. And that's super tough. And I wouldn't want to live my life under that pretense, like, oh, always think you're going to lose something. But I do think that so many things are taken for granted. We fail to take time to give credit or thankfulness for the things we do have, or working through the things that we don't want to face. I think that's really avoided. Starting off with the prologue, Miss Knapp is at a Thanksgiving gathering. She ended up playing with one of her friend's kids and put two of them on her back. She got super disoriented and ended up falling, had to go to the emergency room, had split open her knee. And that was like a crushing realization for her that she put those children's safety under threat. I found this so powerful because you just jump straight into perspective. You get her experience right then and right there. And I feel like that just made me so intrigued by this book already. She had enough awareness to know those children were in danger. It would be a long path and road before she were able to come to a place where she was ready to give up the substance. Now, initiating through the first few chapters, we get a view of what alcohol, the role it played in her life. Regardless of any emotion, regardless of any situation, she drank alcohol. and she could drink any type. And as someone who has never drinking in their life, I did not know there are so many types of alcohol. She would take anything. And I feel like saying this is a little bit irrelevant, but I just thought it was interesting because I've never really had experience in that realm. She just knew these different drinks like the back of her hand and why they tasted the way they did or which one she preferred. But even if she didn't prefer it, she knew she was going to drink it because that gave her satisfaction. As we move on through the book, we see how well Caroline is able to balance the responsibilities of her life and still incorporate alcohol. She does a fantastic split of this. Like, shows up to work, one of the highest performers, and has everything together. But as soon as she leaves work, she knows where she's heading. She knows where she's hitting the alcohol, and she knows how much she's going to drink until she can't feel anything, essentially. She does start to get confronted by her sister and her mother, like, hey, why is there alcohol in the bathroom? Or, hey, I saw the bottle of wine in the fridge that has been half drinking. Like, what happened? And Caroline's like, oh, like I just took a sip, must have been dad. There's always an excuse to cover up the behavior. The more excuses she made, the more entrenched she got into the fallibility of her life. She was able to convince herself through those excuses, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, I'm doing just fine. Look, I'm going to work. I'm showing up for my friends. I have my life together. It's not bad enough yet, even though she was drinking a substantial amount. I really appreciate the middle of the book as it transitions into the culture and how society treats alcohol. It's such a regularized thing, and I don't think that's necessarily bad, but I think it's unfortunate what it has become because we can obviously see it has damaged the world for the worse. If you just look, there are so many statistics about how alcohol has contributed to death, or how it's contributed to the economic situation, or how it's contributed to using more harsh drugs. I think there's poor commentation on giving a well-rounded view of alcohol. Because for me, I got like, oh, have a drop and you'll be addicted. Whereas I have other friends, it was like they didn't have those boundaries. So getting drunk for them was their boundary. And kind of rewinding back and be like, whoa, do I want to get drunk every night? Do I need this to be socially active? And if they have to attempt it in such an aggressive manner, that's where these behaviors start coming up, because it's like, oh, I remember that time that I had alcohol and how it made me feel, and I do not feel this way now. And then those habits start trickling in, and it's usually never an abrupt, oh my goodness, my life has fallen apart. I drink 2 bottles a day, I'm completely incapacitated. It's typically not like that. Even in the book, she's saying, like, here's your normal alcoholic, okay? They are able to have these excuses, reactions, and behaviors. And she was like pretty confident on that. And I think one of those things that she brought up is it's a gradual shift. You don't know what's happening because each time, if you're only adding a little bit, what's to change until you realize that the people around you, and at most yourself, is being the one broken down the worst. For Caroline, alcohol depressed everything, which it is a depressant, so that makes sense. But it helped her feel like she could release all the tension she had of trying to fit in or connecting with others. The social interactions for her were extremely overwhelming, and that was the biggest point. But she also went to say it helped her avoid a lot of the difficulties in her life that she faced. And that was a poor connection with her parents. She didn't feel loved, and she felt judged by other people as well. And she just wanted to be sufficient enough. And by drinking alcohol, she didn't have to face those hard topics in her life. Now, for an alcoholic versus someone who drinks alcohol, I like her split on this because she approaches it as when you drink alcohol, your body is supposed to tell you when to stop. You know when you've reached the limit because your body is able to signal that. Whereas for an alcoholic, there's a neural wiring, there's a genetic predisposition to just keep drinking. No one is telling you to stop. There's never a red light. The pushing factor of drinking alcohol is that the more you drink, the more your body loses its ability to create a sense of satisfaction without drinking, or create a sense of security without drinking, or create a sense of happiness without drinking. All of these things are really completely compromised. For me, this part made me feel the passion I have for what you put inside of your body. It would be stupid to deny that everything you put in your body has an effect. Anywhere and everywhere. I love this attention surrounding substances and being aware of what these do to our body. But a lot of chemicals have poor effects on our body. And I think becoming aware of, okay, things that aren't considered a drug or are kind of recognized regularly, it just sparks the nutrition sense in me. In that America is so lost right now. Like, I don't think the only addiction is to substances, right? We have addiction to pornography. We have addiction to processed foods. All of those chemicals are getting us wired at a fundamental level where our body's ability to function decreases over time. So, yes, I find this messaging around alcohol very important, but I think it would also be important to consider everything that we put into our bodies. It's not just the drugs, it's not just the substances. Anything that comes in contact with our bodies should be intentionally picked. And not everything leads to an addiction, right? I feel like I have a hard time bringing this up because it's like, I understand the importance of highlighting alcohol here, but these other categories of our life have just as equal of a play. There are so many ways this can show up, and I hope I've articulated this message okay. Now she goes into the false conception that alcohol provides for the individual who's drinking. They get a sense of choice. They feel like they're in control. They might feel like they have power, or they might feel like they have good reasoning. It feels good is essentially the end point. But then unfortunately, you get into these scenarios that are just so tragic. Like, she talked about rape victims, and she talked about drunk driving and about overdosing and all of these tragic events because someone has given their responsibility to alcohol. It is just devastating. And one of the ways this shows up in her life is she's constantly jumping from relationship to relationship. And while she has her fair share of poor qualities in how she shows up in her relationship, she is constantly setting herself with guys who simply don't care about her, who demean her, regardless of alcohol or not. It's unfortunate how common it is that girls are feeling stuck in a relationship that doesn't serve them, in a relationship that brings them down, but they want love and connection so badly. And I think also with the signaling of wanting to be married and wanting to start a family, that kind of pushes people to make these abrupt decisions of, oh, well, I'll just stick it out because this is the expectation of me or for me. She had multiple experiences in her adolescence and in her adulthood of just guys taking advantage of her. And I think the more often this happened, it made her kind of feel like it was regular, like, oh, well, here it goes again. I'll just sit and turn off. And especially as she brought alcohol into the mix, it was like, well, this just helps me disassociate completely from what I'm experiencing. And then she gets into the sticky ground of cheating and having a double life in adultery. My heart really broke on this one because her last boyfriend was one of the only guys that truly treated her well and gave her the time of day and gave her so much patience and grace. And that was the relationship that kind of got screwed up because she was giving attention to other guys. I think it was a response to all the unfortunate events. I don't believe that justifies her actions, but I think it does give us some context into what was going on and for what reason. And now towards the end of the book, we have Caroline just tipping into the greatest free fall of her life. Her father gets ill and starts passing away and eventually dies. And her mother dies from terminal cancer. And she just completely engorges in drinking to satisfy the depression she was going through. This part is super hard for me because it's like, death is such a sad and devastating thing. And honestly, it's something I'm still trying to navigate, how I grieve or how to show up, or how do you understand the new functioning of the world after someone passes. And I think I just felt so much sympathy for her because it's like, again, did she make a poor decision to use alcohol as a crutch and to get through these super tragic experiences? Yeah, but also I'm sitting here like, can I blame her? Like, that is horrible to lose your parents regardless of how well they treat you in your life. I think it just goes to show the strength of the biological connection of a parent and the curiosity in knowing that there's someone out there who brought you into this world, and having them gone is a big deal. Whether they raised you or not, someone brought you here and now they're gone. Before she approaches rehab, she kind of goes through the mentality again of, well, I'm not as bad as so-and-so, and it would express their story or say, look at me, I'm still able to perform. And again, there goes those excuses of, I can still do it, I'm still hanging in there. But she came at wit's end of like, after both of her parents died, her sister calls her and is like, I've lost my parents and I have a feeling I'm going to lose you too if you don't get your stuff together. And that made her think, but ultimately it came down to Caroline making the decision for herself. She needed to know why she didn't want to be in that situation anymore. She wanted to know why rehab would be helpful or not. Something I did find interesting that I should have brought up earlier is she brought in the idea of, she was kind of confused why she was so attracted to alcohol, because her family was like very composed. There weren't a lot of things outside of the nuclear family, but it kind of went to show like how much things were being held under wraps. As her father was dying, he got to a point where he was incapacitated. He didn't have function of his brain nor his muscles, and Caroline was able to meet with his therapist. His therapist was explaining to her how her father had actually been through an affair the entirety of the marriage between him and his mother, and how he had a really, really rough childhood that made him susceptible getting into that relationship outside of his marriage and being in a battleground between, oh, I'm having an affair, but I actually really love my life. He drank to cover his bases. He drank to disconnect and release that tension. I think this kind of gave Caroline an answer of like, oh, maybe I was susceptible. But I think it's important because she goes to say, hey, actually, no one is immune to addiction. You never know. Like, you could have the most perfect life and be struggling with heroin. You could be at the lowest of lows. It doesn't matter what your circumstances is, and to be blind to the fact that addiction can impact anyone just increases the vulnerability of that. I really appreciated that part of her message, because I sometimes think if I just give my kid all of this, or if I just do all of these right things, then my life will be set. You don't have control of that, especially when other people are involved. You do not have a say in how it goes. Now, in rehab, she meets a handful of people, and I want to say it was like maybe 7, and 5 out of the 7 relapsed. And reading those stories were so critical for me in, again, further understanding the depth of addiction. Some of the people were using multiple substances, and some just focused on alcohol, but Caroline consistently made the choice to show up every day. She knew that if she wasn't at a meeting, she was making herself susceptible to drinking again. She also included the fact that Alcohol Anonymous meetings weren't going to be sufficient enough for everyone. That the methods there may not be applicable to someone else's life, and giving people space to navigate how they want to enter their process of healing, rebuilding, would be up to them. And there wasn't a one path that was going to work for everyone. She also went to say, just because she had been clean for several years didn't clear her from the want to drink alcohol. She had to intentionally choose each and every day that she was abstaining from it. She knew her triggers, and she understood that spending time with certain people or being near a bar, that would not be conducive to her environment. The last thing I'll mention on this is seeing her transformation of genuine self-awareness. At the beginning of the book, she's feeling like she's in touch with herself because, oh, I'm sad, well, I'm gonna drink, and then I can be social and I can be present. But in reality, she was just masking the things she was experiencing. At the end, now we have her completely transformed into a completely new version of her life. And I think this was a great way to end the book. A final message of saying anyone has the power to change if they choose. And no matter what depths or loss you're at, there's always space for improvement and to get better. And we just have to seek those resources. We have to create that community for ourselves. And I think before that's able to happen, you have to show up for yourself. And that's hard. I honestly don't have all the answers for that. And maybe that's a conversation that can be started in the comments below of what does it look like showing up for yourself, or trying to surround yourself with people that will show up for you. Now we see this book was an extensive coverage of what addiction was like, which I found so beautiful. I would recommend this book to honestly anyone. Why I don't think you need to have experience with substance is because knowledge is power. And these experiences she shared in the book helped me feel like I could better understand why people might rely or make certain choices that they do, or act out in certain ways that they do. And I feel like it just equipped me better. I appreciate if you have stayed along for this book review. If you end up reading the book, you should definitely tell me what your thoughts are about it. If you have any book recommendations, just drop them in the comments. I'm looking forward to the next video, and until then, keep it real and keep it healthy.